If a friend came to you and said, I found somebody who's perfect for you, what would you do? If it were me, I would go online right away and I would try to figure out who this person was. I'd be on Facebook or Instagram, I'd look up the name, and I'd try to find that profile picture. And if I was looking and I was interested, what I would do is I would pull up that profile and I would see if I could see a couple more pictures. Why? I would do that because I would want to know as much as I could about this person. What can you find out from a picture? You can find out a little bit about their character. You can find out something about whether or not they have friends, perhaps. You might be able to find out interests. All of this information is stuff that helps you figure out, is this somebody who I want to invest in? There is an argument in a corner of scholarship that says that the four Gospels in the Bible have disunity to them. What the argument contains is an argument that Matthew is saying something different than Mark, something different than Luke, and something different than John. They talk about similar events, but they contrast each other in certain ways. What I'm here to argue for you today is I want to help you see, when you look at the four separate Gospels, that these are four separate pictures that help us see who Jesus is. When you look at all of those, you get a better understanding of him, the one who matters so much. So what I'll do is I'll go through the four. We'll start with Matthew. We'll spend a little extra time there. And then we'll speed up through Mark, Luke, and John. And what you should walk away with is an understanding of how each adds to that image. Now, Matthew was presenting this message to Jewish people. Jewish people had had communication from God for a long time. They had the Ten Commandments. They had God guiding them through the wilderness. They had a history. They also had problems in their history. The book of Judges is a book inside of the Jewish canon, and what it talks about is it talks about this cycle. See, what would happen in the cycle is you start at one point and it'd be a catalyst. God would do something good, and then there would be celebration. The people would be happy that God did something good, and then there would be some kind of complacency where they forget about it, and then they would have to deal with consequences. Those consequences would be a pain. And we wouldn't be able to get out of those until God did something good again. Now, it wasn't just a circle moving all in the same. It was built a little bit like a spring. See, it went downward. But from the starting point of Judges to the end of Judges, there's a great downward movement in the morality of the people. And it is a message to us about morality in our lives. How even though we may strive for perfect virtue in our days, it's fleeting. And those who have gone before us have proven how imperfect our pursuit of virtuous perfection can be. Matthew wanted us to know that Jesus is a cycle breaker. So Matthew starts off with these words. He's going to start off describing the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, keyword there, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Now, those references, son of David and son of Abraham, they both lean back into the history, saying he is part of the history that we came out of. But that word Messiah talks about the way that he's going to break us out of it. The word Messiah is an anointed person, and a person would get oil put on their head if they were set aside for a particular valuable job. Person would be anointed a king or anointed a priest, and Jesus was the Messiah, the person anointed to break the cycle for us. To be a person who strives after virtue with their life and feels failure at every turn, Matthew is a book for you. Matthew helps you see who Jesus is. Now, Mark is going to move on, and it's going to paint Jesus in a different perspective. So what Mark wants us to know is that Jesus is a man of action. The book of Mark uses the word immediately more than 40 times. So how he's going to describe Jesus, he's going to say that Jesus did a miraculous work, and then Jesus healed a person, and then Jesus got in a debate to help people learn. And then Jesus went to a new place to find new people he could help. And then he went here each time. Immediately is his transition. Because Mark wanted you to know that Jesus is a man of action, ready to make difference, taking value of the days. If you've ever looked up to someone in order to see that they squander their time, what a great contrast that is with Jesus, who is hardworking and constantly thoughtful about people like you and me. When we get around to the book of Luke, Luke wants us to know that Jesus is a friend of the needy. Luke focuses on describing how Jesus spent time around in his words, the sinners and tax collectors, describing those who knew they were far from the temple and they were far from faith. Jesus in the book of Luke says that he came as a physician for those who are needy, not for those who are well. Luke wants us to know that if we find ourselves not able to make something great out of life, if we at the end of the day just wish that we could have had a bigger impact, that we could have been the change maker, and wish that our life could mean something more, Jesus is a friend of the needy. When we get to the book of John, John wants to make sure that you and I know that Jesus wasn't just a man. So John is going to take a reference that Jesus utilizes back in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, God presents himself to Abraham in the form of a burning bush that didn't burn up and a voice. And in that voice he said, "Tell them I am is the one who is sending you." So 7 times John is going to record Jesus making I am statements. Before Abraham was, I am. It's very clear. John wants us to know that Jesus is the good shepherd who watches after his sheep. Jesus is the bread of life. If you or I have ever been hungry, we know what it's like to feel like you can't, that you're not full, that you need something. John was written to help us see that. Now, I recently left a teaching position, and I had been teaching there for 5 years formally and then another 5 years informally, and my successor did something incredibly meaningful to me. He did an open mic night, and during that time, for about an hour, students would come up one by one, and they'd sit on a stool or they'd stand by a mic, and they would talk about some of the influence that I had had. Oh, I was humbled by their kindness. One girl got up and she described leadership development and how much that meant to her. Another guy got up and he described mentoring. Another student got up and described having a listening ear. If you think about all the people whose lives you have influenced, family and kids, friends, neighbors, coworkers, how would they describe you? Each of them has been impacted differently. And each of those different impacts is only part of the picture of who you are. If you read the 4 Gospels, look at them like this. Know that they stand together, united, separate facets, helping us see the full picture of who Jesus is. Thank you.